Hi everyone, how you doing? This is just a little intro to our latest episode with former Mayor of Sefton and former Labour Councillor and writer Bobby Brennan. David, how did you think this interview went?
I thought it was really interesting, and I think actually this is the whole beauty of these podcast interviews, is finding out about what people are doing. And I love the fact that he's retired and he's still finding new things, new challenges. He's left politics to start writing and being creative and exploring the whole forgotten stories, especially of Bootle and the war and everything. And these will now be passed on to next generations. So that was fascinating. And also his experience, he's not in politics now, but how it worked before. And currently the Scrutiny Committee for Children's Services has a Labour chair and a Labour vice chair, and that's it. But he was saying in his time he had opposition parties and they were working together. And I thought, wow, that's what Sefton needs. It needs unity rather than people just getting points off each other for the different political parties. So I thought there was just so much in the interview, and it was great.
Well, that's upcoming, and it is a great interview, and he speaks well, Bobby. And I think he emphasised the importance of history and culture. His most recent book, which is out, I think, this week or the next week or two, is A Time of Peace and War. This is recorded on the 10th of August, so it might be out. The link will be in the notes. And I've read his other three books. They're all outstanding. And he writes with a real directness, but with there's humour in there. And it is an expose as well. And in his first book, A Glitter and Malice, he did cover a lot of the issues which you just raised, his criticisms of cabinet government and the whipping system in local government. Obviously, we mentioned children's services, and there's an Ofsted report due out really soon. We'll be reporting on that, how that went, because it hasn't been good in children's services for a number of years. He was also quite critical of the family connections that exist in South Sefton in the Labour Party, and the failure to listen to residents locally in the local Labour Party, particularly in the south of the borough, and how that just doesn't help anyone and opens the door to parties like Reform UK, who he's very worried about in the future. But I think what he said about the Strand as well, he was quite critical that all the money that's been put in the Strand might have been spent better elsewhere. He also had some great opinions on Southport regeneration and how diversity and a kind of multicultural aspect to Southport is the way forward, because that's what we're like these days in Britain. And he also mentioned something fantastic, as well as some of his achievements, which were very notable actually, and we'll let Bobby speak for himself. He mentioned that we used to have a Magdalen laundry in what is now the Sefton area, and that there was quite a few of them, and they were exposed in Ireland initially as places where a lot of abuse took place. So it was really a fascinating interview, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I still can't get over that there was a Magdalene laundry in Crosby. It's the idea that we must tell these forgotten stories, that we must tell our past, or else it's forgotten.
Yeah.
And we then have a different narrative entirely, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the good thing is Bobby's still working for Sefton CDS now, even though he's stepped back from politics. He's found writing as he approaches the afternoon of his life, shall we say. And it just goes to show, as you said earlier, it doesn't matter what your situation is, there's always that moment to start something new and different. So this is a great interview.
And I also think to remember that not only has everyone else got a story to tell, but the stories of our community are precious. They are hidden treasures, and we should be telling them.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's listen to the interview. You'll really enjoy this. Support Bobby's written work and listen to what he says about politics and culture and history. It's all fascinating stuff. Hi everyone, welcome to Building a Better Sefton. This is our next interview with Bobby Brennan, who was a former Mayor of Sefton, a former Labour Councillor, and also a local author who's just about to publish his fourth book. Before we get started, we'll just do intros again. I'm Tim Short. David Moorhead, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very excited to have a creative person to interview. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, because
Definitely
you
the
are
arts.
Yeah, well, you're a writer and a playwright yourself. And Bobby Brennan, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Tim. Good to see you, David. Thank you.
As a writer and, as someone who's been involved in local politics, how important do you think this is to the future of Sefton, this kind of creative industries and people getting involved in things?
I think, and it was a good friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, Ralph James, who actually said it to me. He said, we need to get things down in writing because we're probably the last to remember, the 1960s, the 1950s. And he said, and you're not taught this in school, and it's like local history. You're not taught about, you're taught maybe like in national history, but you're not taught about local history and things that happen locally. And he said, who's going to tell our stories when we're not there? And the stories that I'm telling, the stories that, should have maybe been told many years ago when I'd done research about the local area. I thought I was a guru on Sefton and Orrell, being a Sefton councillor in Orrell from 1994 to October 2022. I thought I knew it all. But I learned when I became Mayor of Sefton in 1999-2000, millennium year, I learned more about Sefton when I was the mayor. And I think everyone should have a stint to be mayor because you do learn a lot more. Having said that, I work in the community voluntary sector with Sefton CVS, and I've learned more about Sefton working with Sefton CVS because they are the ears on the ground. So, and I think when I look at, local issues, I was astounded by the fact that we had a Conservative MP, before the war. And in the fourth book, which has now just been published, yesterday, and waiting to order some copies, the MP for Bootle, Kinley, who came in 1945 with the Labour landslides, he was the first Labour councillor for Orrell Ward in 1910. So that was something which I found out. So it's I'm following the footsteps of giants, and and I think little things like that. I've educated myself through a bit of research. And it's nice to know that the people that feature in my book, though it's a fictional history book, but I name obviously the MP, the Tory MP, because he figures in one of the fictional families, and they go to see the MP. And then I mentioned obviously 1945 and put in about Kinley winning the seat, but. It's quite humbling to think, good grief, this is a man who was stood for what was then the very socialist Labour Party and won their first Orrell Ward seat. When I won it in 1994, I took over from previous Labour councillors, never known its history, though an old friend of mine, a stalwart of the trade union movement, Kenny Jones, had once told me that this was always a Conservative seat, and it had been up and probably till the 1980s. So writing a book and researching has opened my eyes to a lot as well. So it's going back to what Ralph said. If you don't get it down in writing and it's not there and it's not in the history books, it's on the history books, so it's not there, and people aren't going to know these things. So we were out the other day, and I always pick up books in Wales. In Prestat, and they have books which you can pick up and donate, and it goes to the local charities or the Ukraine. And Leslie said to me, wife said to me, just think your book might be in there one day, and it's in Waterstones. The books are in Waterstones, which is great. But I hope that people will when they read my books, they'll give them remember things that maybe the grandparents will say, oh yeah, we remember that. Because, as Ralph said, we're now in the front row seats. So it's leaving that behind. And I think, it's making sure that those little memories, those childhood memories, are not forgotten. My fourth book, which is A Time of Peace, A Time of War, is about a fictional family in Caerardy Avenue. I've chose Caerardy Avenue because that sits with probably some of the characters in the book.
So that's the founder of.
That's
one of the founders of the Labour Party, isn't it? And there's a street in Bootle named after him. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, in my book, that's mentioned in the book as well. And it's based, fictional families are based around King Avenue and that. It's Kirardy Avenue and King Avenue, where I was born in King Avenue, so I can relate to the book in that and put myself in the character positions. Now I've dedicated the book to my late father-in-law, Leslie's dad, because he served in the Atlantic and Malta convoys during the Second World War, up for the entire war, and he was torpedoed twice in a raft. My book covers part of his story, but it's not his story, but it's a fictional account, but based on things he'd said. My granddad, who I was brought up with in King Avenue, he was wounded at El Alamein, and then he was also at Monte Cassino in Italy. And one of the characters in my book, it's based on my granddad's wartime experiences. So though they're fictional, they're based on, some of it's based on true life.
No, I think you've explained that really well.
Yeah,
the idea that unless we write down the stories, they will be forgotten. These are important stories. Every community has them, and well done. And I will be ordering a book. I look forward to reading that one.
Yeah. Well, I've read all of Bobby's books, and the fourth one. What we'll do is when we release this podcast, we'll share details about the books. Now, Bobby, your first book is about like a bit of you called it a mix between Kes, the book, a famous film, and Stand By Me. Yeah, and it's very much like a warts and all coverage of your upbringing. You then did a children's book, which is kind of like an environmental book. And then you did a fantastic book about county lines, which is a big issue in all local areas, including Sefton. And now you've done this war one. Now, David, you've got some experience of writing in the past, and you're a playwright. I've been to see a few of your plays. And I think this just adds to the rich culture and heritage and history of a place like Sefton, because we do forget we're in two generations. The World War II generation, they're gone now, aren't they? So I think it's very important.
You're writing about the 30s and the 40s, and people will be writing about today. And Bootle Strand, as you know, is undergoing change at the moment, but there's so many stories there. What do you think of the current situation with the Strand?
I have mixed views on it, to be honest, David. I mean, I remember the Strand. I was there when it was opened by the mayor, the Strand, and it was an open air, building. And I remember it, and it was a nice place to go to. Having said that, Seafoot Village was a lovely place to go to, and all these areas have all gone into decline. Bootle Strand, I think that's been a victim of socioeconomic policies over the years, and it's fell into decline. I personally don't see why money was spent on purchasing it. I think that was maybe that money maybe could have been maybe better spent somewhere else. But then, you look around at Liverpool, and most of these shopping developments have actually gone. Or there's one. I think there's one in Belle Vale, which is probably not very well used. So I think if you're going to purchase, and I think this is one of the things that it may be with the benefit of foresight, they may have considered, the future of the Strand, and more so in attracting businesses to it. Because I don't think that, we're doing that. I don't think we're attracting businesses to it at the moment. There's a lot of empty shops. People say to me all the time about the Strand, it's an eyesore, this, that, and the other. I remember it in its heyday, but I also remember the Marion Square and Carmeadow shops in Ford, where there was a lovely row of shops in the 1960s. Now I think there's only one shop open. That's a Chippy. So I remember all that, and it's okay looking back, because the days of when we never had it so good and all that. But I think. There's so much more to be addressed in Bootle than having a shopping centre. I think there's a lot of socioeconomic problems, housing, for example. We need to be building more houses for people. I don't think the Strand is the answer. I think once likes of Marks and Spencers and that pulled out, I think then the writing was on the wall for it, and it's how we attract businesses. you know, what's going to attract small businesses to go in a Strand? There's got to be some form of reward at the end of the day, you know, longevity of business, and I don't think we've that's been considered. And I'm not saying it's been set up to fail, but you know, I have mixed views about it.
Right, no, thank you for sharing that. I was going to ask, as you talked about housing, then what about children's services? Because since 2016, Ofsted have rated it inadequate. Have you any views on? Because obviously, as we tell the stories, and we tell stories in the future about this time, the children's services has a huge impact on Sefton. So, could you share your views?
Yeah, I was contacted by people who were involved in like the pressure groups or more like campaign groups about what was going on children's services, and we should never have a situation where Ofsted are coming in and where there's a risk of a department being taken over by central government. I think that's, you know, the risk there gives an indication of how poor things are. But I mean, I'm not a member of the Labour Party anymore. I've left the Labour Party, so I'm not going to knock them, because I think they're starting to turn things around in Sefton. I think that they may have. I think they've probably learned the lessons, and I have to say that I've heard nothing but good things about the scrutiny review and the cabinet member and their, you know, working with Ofsted to turn things around. So I've not heard anything, you know, detrimental since, though. I think the lessons have probably been learned. Having said that, you can't take your eye off the ball. It's something that you've got to be remain focused on. Whether that's the views of people who got of young children who've not got a service, I don't know. That just,
I think there are still many families being failed.
Yeah, I know
that's
no doubt
reality and pain. And hopefully, they've just had a new Ofsted. We will see if what you've been told is the case.
Yeah, I hope so, because I mean, I was, as a Sefton councillor, I was on children's services some years back. Not when there was any issues. I have to say, I'm not sort of blowing my own trumpet, but I made some really good, you know, some changes on children's services. There was some very good opposition councillors. One in particular was the late Richard Hands, who was really, I mean, I held him in very high regard, Richard. Particularly for the support of mental health service users. Well, Richard was the Liberal Democrat spokesperson before I took over as the Labour spokesperson, but I gave him the chairmanship of one of the working groups looking into Alder Hey and the issues around it, because, you know, it wasn't a case of, right, we've got this now and you're getting nothing. It was whoever was the best person suited for it. So I recognised Richard's attributes and his abilities and kept him as the chair of a working group. I also had set another working group, and again, that went to an opposition party member. I had the usual, what are you doing that for? You're supposed to give the chairs to, you know, the working groups to Labour members. But no, you know, that's it. When you've got to address problems by using the experience around that table, and if it's not coming from your own party, then you use the people that can do it. So I done it, and then I got moved. Yeah.
Because sadly, at the moment, on the scrutiny committee, it's just Labour, and then you've got the opposition removed. And I think your previous working policy is very wise and should be adopted.
Yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't. I think what I done was probably was unique in that regard, and that, and then eventually I was took off children's services, and for whatever reason. But I wasn't around when the problems there. I'd like to think I'd have picked up on any issues straight away. I certainly picked up on issues around targeted mental health in schools, because that's something that I was really forefront in advocating for, targeted mental health in schools and pushing for that. And at the end of the day, it's a scrutiny review committee, and they're there to hold the cabinet accountable. So it's like that. How, you know, someone said to me, "Oh, the Labour scrutiny is out. You're not going to hold the cabinet accountable to the Labour cabinet. And to some extent, I agree with that, because then, you know, are you going to go against the hierarchy? Are you going, you know, you're going to turn around and but at the end of the day, the cabinet, you know, they make the decision, so it doesn't really matter what scrutiny review put forward. The cabinet can turn around and they dismiss it, ignore what's put forward anyway. But I thought the best approach, and in the interest of being transparent and in the interest of local democracy and the Nolan principles, was to have an open and transparent working group and chaired by members of other parties. Yeah, I think you see that to an extent nationally in Parliament, but it certainly just wasn't happening locally. But I did on Children's Services do that. I've done that.
You mentioned that in your first book, your criticisms of cabinet government, where it's very much the dominant party closing things down, and that was one of the things that you felt wasn't as good in recent years, which might have caused some of this lack of transparency and some of these issues materialising. Yeah. Have you got anything else to say on that, kind of the style of the council structure that you were critical of?
I'm still all that views, Tim. I held that view when I was a Labour councillor, and I hold that view now. I think because you can't put the power in the hands of one individual, because then it's open then to for nepotism, cronyism, and that's been called out by some Labour councillors who have gone now. Who lost the seats, who had the whip removed from them for raising those very issues. To me, there's no meritocracy, and this decision, position should be based on meritocracy, not on family ties and and that. And a cabinet should recognise the abilities of all, and whether you like that person or not. If they got the ability to do the job, then put them in that place, in post. Cabinet, I think the worst thing that the Labour Party did was bring in the cabinet structure. I think it was Miliband who brought it. I'm not sure. I think it might be Miliband, but that was one of the worst things. That I think they talked about, like local democracy and having scrutiny review committees and being more democratic and ward committees with area committees, and they've all gone. The area committees are gone. So that bringing democracy into the community, it's gone. And so all you've got is the cabinet, and it's not democratic when you have 8 people saying, right, we've made this decision, and when they come into the Labour group meeting, they say, okay, this is what we're going to decide, and whether you like it or not. I mean, they will argue, well, we've discussed it, and you had the chance to raise it, but no, if they decide something, doesn't make no difference.
The next question was going to be the biggest change that needs to happen in Sefton. Have you answered that just then by saying we need to remove the system where 8 people decide everything? Do you think that's the biggest change? Well, I don't think that's probably
it'd be the biggest change as regards to democratic process, I think. Because when there was no overall control in Sefton, the cabinet would be made up of members of all 3 parties. Now you've got you've got the Greens, there's a Green councillor. You may well have Reform councillors next year, and I said wouldn't advocate for them to be sharing cabinet posts. So I think it is what it is. I can't see it going away. I think the biggest challenge for Sefton is the future of local democracy and what happens in next year's elections, who gets elected, because the populist vote is increasing right across the UK. The opinion polls are very stark, with Reform holding a steady 33 to 35%, above Labour's 25%. I just worry that for the future. So I think the future of Sefton depends on what happens on the doorstep, what people vote for. And you get what you vote for, as they say. But, I think Reform are... we can't dismiss them. We can't shrug them off as a protest vote. But I fear, for local government... you've already seen it in some of the areas where they took over. I mean, one of the first things they did up in the northeast was remove the rainbow flag within a few days before the Durham Pride March. So there's an example of what they're about. But unfortunately, we next year we may see Reform councillors, because you've got them in Skelmersdale. Never ever dreamt that was happening in Skelmersdale. Was more left wing than probably Bootle. You've got reformed county councillors. So as regards the greatest challenge for Sefton, I think, is the future of local democracy. But then, having said that, if the community will it, then that's what the community wants, and you've just got to work with it. They're not prescribed, so if they get into power, you've just got to work with them and note that you can maybe change hearts and minds and work for the good of all people in Sefton. But I don't know. But removing the cabinet in a one party, where it's not a home council, I think there shouldn't be a cabinet dominated by one party. In some areas it can't be helped, but there is. I mean, like the Audit and Governance Committee, for example, the Liberal Democrats had always argued that should be a non-Labour Party chair, and I chaired that for a number of years, Audit and Governance. But I have to say, they're right. The likes of Audit and Governance should not be chaired by a member of the ruling party. It should be, an outside chair, a chair from another party. So there are things that could change. I don't think they will. I think Labour's majority in Sefton, as it stands, is too high. So I can't see the cabinet structure changing unless National Party scrap the cabinet system. But I just think it's not very good for democracy. When you're talking about community politics, making it more accountable to the community, then the cabinet structure does not do that. Scrutiny review doesn't do that, because scrutiny review is a toothless tiger. As you make recommendations that can be ignored. So, and I believe, and I've never said that openly when I was on the council, because I'd been told before the whip, but I said it when I left. But I thought it. I mean, I did say to some colleagues, but then someone will say to me, "Oh, you're only saying that because you never were on the cabinet, because you wouldn't given the cabinet position." That's fair enough, but I still don't feel it's in the interest of democracy to have, that overall control. I think you have to have a consensus, and you can't get that with the one-party state.
I know you've been concerned about lack of public engagement as well. Do you think one of the things which councillors could do in supposed safe seats, even though that might be in question with the rise of reform, what do you think the importance of public engagement is? Because I know you had issues over Orrell Park and also over the Church Road issue with whether Rimrose Valley or Church Road is going to take more traffic for the port, and also consultation over possible sports pitches being built on the old Silcox playing field, which is now called Orrell Park, I think. You were concerned about lack of consultation there. Is that something that you think Labour could improve on?
I'd like to think that the lessons have been learned from Orrell Mount, because I mean that led to my resign from as a councillor. I had 2 years to go. I could have stayed till 2024. But I wasn't going to stay as an independent. I wasn't going to cross the floor. I'm not attacking those that did resign the seats and stay as independents. I wouldn't do that. That's a matter for them. It's something that I would not have felt right with me, because I was elected as a Labour councillor and I resigned. If I wanted to stand again, I would have stood as an independent. But I'd had enough. It was time for me to leave politics. I'd had enough, and I left on a high because of these. I delivered as local councillor for the local residents, and that's something that it's nice to be. Remember that I did something right. And I think what I seen with the consultation was a sham. I even said that to council officers, it was a sham. I put that in emails to the Friends of Orrell Mount Park, the pressure group, the campaign group. I was openly transparent in everything that I did. Got me reports to the whip, but then the whip, it was thrown out because there was no case to answer. I had not broken party rules, because the Labour Party rules and the Nolan principles are that you engage with the community. Well, how can you engage the community if you refuse to meet with them because there's some stand against you in local politics? Well, if someone stood against me, that's giving a democratic choice to people. I'd never turned around, and when people stood against me, I'd always listen to what they'd have to say at the end, shake the hand, and that's the way it is, because you welcome challenge, and if people are challenging it, I used to think, good grief, that's 200 people voted for the socialist alternative. That's 200 votes that I need to turn around. I need to find out what is it that we're not doing right. I always had a really good popular vote. I was polled the highest in the all outs and things like that. And you knew that you'd had like a personal vote, because people would put on it, like, so for example, when Peter Glover from the Social Alternative stood, they were putting like Glover Brennan, he was 2 votes on. People saying to me, why are they voting for one Labour and one socialist alternative? And I'd say, well, obviously they must think that what I'm doing, what Peter's doing is good. And that, so I had a personal vote. But if people are voting against you, you've got to ask yourself why. And you can't just ignore swathes of the community. You've got to be there and work with them and change hearts and minds. And then you think why people have left the Labour Party, because they see things not getting done and the Labour Party not listening. Well, I left after, I mean, I put a complaint into the National Party, and it was just basically, it went to David Evans, the chair, and it was just like shoved under the carpet. So I left after that. I didn't think that the Labour Party, it was no longer the party that I joined, I represented, and I'm glad I left when I did, because I would have left by now anyway, because of what they've done since, the broken promises, the well left, I think. But I left having served the community, and I left with a heavy heart. I mean, there's something that I hadn't planned to do. I didn't think I'd be leaving politics when I did, but I never thought I'd be when I become a party member and council in 1994, I didn't think some 28 years later I'd still be on the council. So I've had some good times, some good memories. I've managed to help a lot of people. That makes a difference. But you've got to work with people. You can't ignore people. Nothing gets done otherwise.
No, I was going to say thank you so much for sharing that, because our next 2 questions were, what are you most proud about, and what do you think are the main criticism you face and Labour faces? And you've answered those really well, so thank you so much. Well, and I really think parties working together and listening and respecting is the way forward. So well done for advocating that and doing that.
One of the things, and I was really proud of doing, was the in Bootle Town Hall. There's nothing to commemorate the civilians that died during the Blitz. I mean, there's an Ash Street memorial, but there was nothing in Bootle Town Hall. Well, I was presented with a book by the former chair of education, Bryn Marsh. He'd done a book called Bootle and the Blitz, and it was a forward by Joe Betton done in it, and it's a book, and it covers an awful lot about what happened after the war and the Battle of the Atlantic. Well, he presented that to me, and he wrote in it to Bobby Brennan, a real Bootle mayor, a man of our people, and that was really nice. But in that book, there was a picture of a clock on St. Bedford Road School, I think it was, in Bedford Road School, a clock on the wall which had stopped, and the school had been burnt out, the incendiary bombs, but the school clock was still on the wall. And I said to Bryn Marsh, I said, good grief, if that clock was still around, and he said, it's in the basement somewhere. So we had that brought up the basement, and I had that put in the foyer of Bootle Town Hall, and a picture underneath it of the actual clock that it was on the wall in the burnt out school, as a lasting memorial to civilian dead from the town. And another one was when I broke tradition and supported the Sunshine School for the Blind, because I actually signed a petition supporting the campaign to keep the school open, and that was I was frowned on. The mayor doesn't get involved. The mayor is non-political. I said, well, no, this is not. The mayor's the first citizen. It should therefore be shown, examples. And signing that was something which, and again, I'm proud of. As I say, it did cause frowns, and it was said to me, well, you can't do that again. But there was little things like that, sort of, the Orange Lodge parade. I mean, I was told, oh, you're a Catholic, Mr. Mayor. You might want to. Do you want to ask the deputy to do this, because the mayor has to waves off the Orange Lodge and Lidland Library, or what was Lidland Library. And the former Labour mayor, he didn't want to do. He didn't do it. So do you want us to ask someone else? And I said, why? Why ask someone else? I said, I'm doing it. So I went and waved off the Orange Lodge. I mean, I'm a Catholic, but at the end of the day, I'm not. It's not sectarianism about me. And I wasn't going to turn around and say, oh yeah, do get someone else to that, because that's wrong. I mean, as the mayor, you're there to serve the residents of all the borough, irrespective of how they vote for you or how they don't vote for you. So that was again another thing. And there was little things that I found out, and I thought, and then I think probably the best thing I did was they used to have the mayor had, so this is when there was budgets and mayoral budgets. They used to have functions every year where the one for the clergy, and it's like they host a clergy dinner, luncheon where the clergy come to town hall and sit down and have a lunch. But I scrapped it and had one for the early years instead. And because I said, well, no, I'm not having a clergy one. We'll have one for the early years. The following year, it went back. The early years one was scrapped, and the clergy one got put back in place. And I also signed was the first of the Merseyside authorities to sign the Armed Forces Covenant. And again, that was mine, another councillor, Les Byram. That was we pushed for that for Sefton to sign it. But it didn't do it as the mayor, I've done it as a councillor. But there's some of the things, so you can do good things. But when I first got elected, I made the commitment to my ward. I said I shall be available, accessible at all times. And people say to me now who've left the Labour Party, you stood true to your values and you always were available all the time, because people would ring me on Christmas Eve. And I think that's it. You can't be a part-time councillor. It's not a 9-to-5 job. People who are desperate, the councillors, they see them. You're the last resort for many of them. And I've had people contacting me at 8 or 9 o'clock at night in absolute, distress at things, and but it's humbling to be able to do things with people, and I found it privileged to be in that position to help. Yeah, no, just saying with regards to the book, and that's one of we're writing the book about, like growing up in Bootle, the funny things I remember as a child, and even like the cockroaches and things like that, the infestations, and people forget how you lived in those days, having a tin bath and no indoor bath. You had a tin bath. And I to me that was my childhood. So once, because that was typical of me and my friends, and again when I likened that first book to Kez and Stammer, because I had great friends, and we went on those adventures together. We've done the same things. We like a little group of us, probably a bunch of ne'er-do-wells and all that, but we had so much fun in that. And there's things sort of, likes of Ford Cemetery. I mean, in my fourth book, A Time for Peace, A Time for War, there's part of it where cadets go to visit a Victoria Cross recipient's grave in Ford Cemetery, which there is. I mean, the chap who died, he won a Victoria Cross in the Indian mutinies, and he's buried in Ford Cemetery. And in that, there's part I won't go into because there's like expletives and that. I don't want to spoil the book if you're going to be getting it. In fact, I'm getting you a copy anyway, Tim. So, and these spot some girls coming out at the side of the convent as the cemetery, accompanied by nuns, and a couple of things happen. Well, what people aren't aware of, and I deliver training around modern day slave and human trafficking, and that convent was the convent of the Good Shepherd. It was a Magdalene nursery. It was built in the 1800s to house women of ill disrepute and to offer them further guidance and training and religious sort of whatever it was. But that was a convent that was still there. I think it closed in about 1966. But I remember the little van used to come round and they used to collect the laundry. But though that was a Magdalene nursery, and again, people don't realise, they see the Phil, the Magdalene sisters and about Islands, but we had one in Bootle. So I done research and found there wasn't just one in Bootle. We had one in several in Crosby. We had this, we had that. So I knew where they all were through research. So it's fascinating, and that's one thing we should really encourage library use. We should encourage more library use. Our children should be really encouraged to use the libraries, and I don't think we do that as much as when I was a kid, because you only had the libraries and swimming baths. You didn't have anything else. So
that's so fascinating about the laundries and the abuse, which we always think it happens in Ireland, but to realise it was Litherland, it was Crosby. I've learned something today, and I think that's why we must tell the stories of our community. Otherwise, it's just forgotten. But the last question is, Southport has many stories to tell, and at the moment, they're trying to change Southport. What do you think of the current changes and plans, and how's it going? What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, again, I don't want to be getting into what I did work-wise, because I was very much involved with the local authorities, community cohesion recovery group, to look at the future community cohesion in Southport. I mean, you'll always get people who yearn for the old Lancashire, white British Lancashire and things like that. But I knew that from when I was a councillor. There was always the campaign to take Southport out of Sefton and things like that. But I think a lot of that is not want to be associated with Liverpool and the Bootle, as they say. Because when I was mayor, I'd go up to Southport and places like Ainston, and so you're from the Liverpool end, and I would say the south of the borough. Oh yes, the Liverpool end. And you talk about a divide of inequality between North and South Sefton, but there's also that exists with the people will still view Bootle as Liverpool. It's never been part of Liverpool, so I think there's always that. We don't want to be associated with them down there. I think that's changed, though. I think that's probably the older Lancastrians. But I think as generations, people become the younger generations come on, and there's more opportunity to meet people from other communities, other cultures, like the Holy Trinity School, for example. They have a high percentage of UK nationals, and that's a wonderful school. They do lots of great work. Well, I think. I think maybe there's two schools of thought in Southport. One, it's changing for the worse, and one, this is how we should be, multicultural and things like that. So I think, as regards changes, I welcome any change that's going to bring stability and community cohesion. I mean, that's something which I'm very much involved in, because we don't want to return to what we've seen last year. We don't want to return to that anywhere in the UK, but we've seen a lot of demonstrations now all over. So as regards to the changes in Southport, I think more needs to be done economic wise. I think there's still a lot of there's businesses actually that are closed, and I think a lot needs more to be done to boost the economy, to welcome new businesses and that. I know after the tragic events of last year, some people cancelled like holidays and functions in like the Prince of Wales Hotel and things like that. But I don't know that we will see what happens with the changes and whether they're welcomed by the communities as a whole. But I think Southport is a wonderful place. I do. I think it's a wonderful place to visit. It's got so much to offer, and I just think that we need to be focusing more on. I think children. I think the future in Southport is bright with the young children. Because I think children, can associate better. And it becomes once again a vibrant town where people like to visit and businesses thrive. I just hope that we don't see a return to what we've seen last year, because that's not the Southport that I know. It's not the Southport that I know at all.
Well, I worked in Southport for 7 years. I absolutely loved the place, and I'm very proud of all parts of. I've lived in Formby, lived in Bootle, and I'm very proud of all parts of Sefton. And I think what you've said today, Bobby, is not only about some of the issues that Sefton faces, but you've given a lot of ideas for how to make it better. And you're contributing to the rich cultural life of Sefton with your 4 excellent books. I'm assuming the 4th one's going to be as good as the previous 3, because I think I've read them in one.
The 4th one, yeah, no, the 4th one, I'm really I'm really pleased with, to be honest, because it covers so much. I say it's humorous, it's romantic, and it's sad. It's got its sad parts. It's romantic. It's not a Mills and Boon. It's a bit more like maybe a Hines and Jonker. But it's humorous. It's fictional families. But I try to put myself in character, and it's about a time where it starts off with, and again, I don't want to take away from the book. But it starts off with there's two brothers. He's a chief fire officer with Bootle, with fire service, and the other brother, the younger brother, he works in the Littlewoods new the Art Deco plant in Edge Lane, building Edge Lane, and he's very worrying about the rise of fascism and this, that, and the other. His brother, who works the fire service, he'd fought in the First World War at the Battle of Jutland, and he's very dismissive of it. It's not going to happen, The one cites the HMS Hood and they'll turn for tail, because he's mentioned the Scharnhorst and where they're building a big battle cruiser. They're not angling for war. And then in parts of the book there'd be a paragraph, and then underneath I'll put exactly what happens in real life, and with this and showing respect, of course, obviously to the fallen. I actually put underneath their names shall live forever, evermore. So it's stuff like that. So I'm really sort of pleased. It's I think it's probably the best piece of work I've ever done.
Let us know your details. By the time we release this, Bobby, I'll be able to share the links. But listen, I just want to say thanks, not just for sharing your books and the ideas in your books and for contributing to culture, but what you said about your experiences and I think what needs to happen moving forward and some of the concerns for Sefton. But you spoke brilliantly today, and thank you for covering so much. David, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's been great listening to you. I love the idea of the parties working together for Sefton. I think that's the only way forward now, is everybody working together. And also your wealth of experience that you're sharing. I'm still shocked by the Magdalene laundries of Crosby, and just keep telling those forgotten stories, because the Ukraine Welcome Centre in Crosby is actually housed in the Methodist Church that was bombed in 41. So it had refugees then, and it's got refugees now from war. So sadly, the past is repeating. So being reminded of the solutions and being reminded makes us more empathetic as well. So it's been great to meet you. And I think it's politics lost that you're not in it.
I mean, it's been lovely meeting you as well, David, and I was aware of some of the work that you've actually done. So it's been great to meet with you, and nice to have that feedback from yourself. If I had to say in politics, I've never written books, so I think leaving politics would give me inspiration to write a book. So I must say now, I'm much happier now writing books than sitting in a council chamber.
Brilliant.
No, you can't Bobby, being creative.
I'm a creative too. We're all creatives, trade unionists, etc. Right, I'll end the recording there. Bobby, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll have a little chat after I've stopped the recording.
Okay.